Okay, now we're going to switch. This is what you came for. This is for the errors in our science books. And you aren't going to get the whole talk. You're just going to get a snippet. You can see all of it. I list off like 16 things that are false or misrepresentations or saying it without evidence. You can see that on my YouTube channel. Everybody take one of my cards. It's got a YouTube channel called Solidify Your Faith. And it reminds me of Ronald Reagan's quote, "The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so." Yeah, there's a lot in our textbooks that isn't so. And I went through our textbooks last summer, and I pointed out several errors. It's things that were false according to Nature and PubMed and NASA and the Smithsonian. I pointed them out to the curriculum director, and she emailed back, said, "We're basically just teaching the state standards." And so I asked, well, what standard says we're 1.6% different from chimpanzees? And she didn't respond, but the superintendent did. And she said, "We're in the process of reviewing your concern and our response with our district's law firm." It's like, what? Yeah. Instead of contacting the publishers so you can get the kids accurate information, they contact their law firm. Well, of course, St. Cloud, we've got, we think you're the shining star. We got only 1 in 4 students can do math or science at the state standard. Only 1 in 3 can read at the state standard. We got failing grades, getting worse. But we got the superintendent of the year, and this is what she did. If you're rewarding failing grades, there's something seriously wrong with our education system. If somebody with failing grades gets the highest award. And so I went to the school board several times and asked them if they would contact the publisher. And you can see these comments there. And on the second one, I said, I came in here thinking everybody wants accurate textbooks. And if there's someone here who doesn't, and I assume nobody that way, but if there is somebody who doesn't want accurate textbooks, that's really close to knowingly lying to students. And if there is somebody like that, that should not be tolerated. They should be reprimanded or voted out at the next election. And the next day or two, I got an email from the superintendent saying this issue has been resolved. It's like, resolved? I don't think so. What they've done is they've laid their hand down. We can see that they don't want accurate textbooks. So if anybody wants to be a school board member in St. Cloud, say, I want accurate textbooks, vote for me. And how did they get this 1.6% different from chimpanzees? PubMed says it's 5%, and keep in mind the difference between those two is 100 million base pairs. And Nature says that we got the common chimp and human Y chromosomes are horrendously different from each other. Horrendously different. Is that a scientific term? Horrendously different? Well, this is how, and I kid you not, are they going to manipulate the data to get 1%? Check this out.
If a genetic paragraph, thousands of letters long, appears twice in a human scroll, but only once in its chimp counterpart, should that second human copy count as thousands of changes or just one? And what about identical paragraphs that appear in both genomes, but in different places, or in reverse order, or broken up into pieces? Rather than monkey around with these difficult questions, the researchers simply excluded all the large mismatched sections, a whopping 1.3 billion letters in all, and performed a letter-by-letter comparison on the remaining 2.4 billion, which turned out to be 98.77% identical. So, yes, we share 99% of our DNA with chimps if we ignore 18% of their genome and 25% of ours. We may not actually be 99% chimp, but we are 100% great ape, and at least a little bananas.
Yeah, and you can see this for yourself. It's on YouTube, Minute Earth. That's a Blind Chance website or channel, and it's, are we really 99% chimp? Well, yeah, if you get rid of the parts that are different, we're 99% the same. And I debated a science teacher in April, and he asked me, I asked him, which genome is bigger, the chimp or humans? And he didn't know. And it's the chimp. It's 3.3 billion base pairs, and a human's 3.1. So there's 200 billion base pairs that are different, which is 6%. So my question is, how can something that's 6% bigger be 1% different? And so I think this is false. And and they talk about the origin of life. And this is the real weakness of the blind chancers. How did life begin? They can't make a cell membrane. How in the world did they get life to begin? Well, this is how they explain it in St. Cloud. There are a number of theories that attempt to explain the origin of life on Earth. The one with perhaps the most scientific support is sometimes called the prebiotic soup theory. And another video says The chemicals, the raw ingredients that make up life, were constantly sloshing around, bumping into each other, and combining into new chemistry. Over millions of years, that process can lead to living organisms. No, it can't. Hydrolysis breaks apart those molecules faster than they get put together, but don't take my word for it. Here's a NASA scientist. She got asked Bob Enyart's question. She didn't want to answer it, and this is at the American Association for the Advancement of Science. And she basically said, yeah, it's a problem, and it's being addressed. Well, yeah, it's a problem, but it's not being addressed. You can see that at NASA admits water is a problem for the origin of life. And this is a PhD in chemistry. In 1 minute, he explains why life can't begin in water. So I took this clip to the school board meeting, and I played him this.
We're taught that chemical evolution started in the oceans, but you say that's the last place you'd expect to look. Why?
Well, okay, to build up a big molecule called a polymer from many little molecules called monomers, for instance, proteins from amino acids and DNA or RNA from the nucleotide building blocks, every step of the way, every combination spits out a water molecule. They call that condensation. But if you already have water molecules dissolving these things, then the water would come back and actually break that bond apart. It's called hydrolysis. So if you try to do this in water, it's the hydrolysis, the breaking apart that would happen and not the forming. In fact, chemists who want to make proteins or DNA or RNA, they exclude water as much as they can. They even have water-absorbing chemicals to draw out the water. So a primordial ocean is the last place I'd expect to find these polymers forming.
Yeah, so I played that at the school board meeting. I get 3 minutes, that's one of them. And I asked, what degree does your curriculum director have? What degree does your science lead have? What degree does your science teachers have? If they don't have a PhD in chemistry and they're teaching kids that life can begin in water, they're wrong. And then I went back again and again. It's like, hey, is there anybody here who can validate that? You got a scientific paper? Again and again, is there anybody in the whole school district who can validate it with a scientific paper? And I gave them my phone number. And nobody has called me yet in this whole process. Nobody wants to know what I have found. And I emailed the curriculum director back in November. Could you or the publisher please send me a link to a scientific paper that shows how life began in water and validate what we are teaching our students? And she ignored it until last week. I emailed her because they took away my access to the textbooks. And so I'm a taxpayer, so I emailed them last week, hey, can I look at the textbooks again? Can you send me another code? And she said, well, you can come in and look at stuff. I said, wait a minute, the superintendent said I could look at them twice. I could have the code twice. Can you send it to me again? And then I asked, could you respond to this request for a scientific paper? And it's been ignored. And so that's what education is. So over millions of years, that process can lead to living organisms. That's an imagination. You know, they manipulate the data. They imagine this to be true. And then this one. Scientists haven't been able to come up with a working hypothesis as to why our retinas are set up backwards. And keep in mind, these are just online videos. They're online textbooks. It would be very simple for the publisher to take down false information. So the publisher finally got back to me. And somebody asked, I had a booth at the fair, and somebody from the curriculum director came by. And she was on that. It's like, hey, I put my name on there. Why didn't anybody call me? I would be on that committee. And we were talking about this, and she said, well, you should submit a request, or you contact the publisher yourself. And I said, yeah, I can do that, but you could contact them too. 2 people contacting them. She says, no, I could get fired. So a teacher is afraid of getting fired for pointing out errors in the textbooks. So these are not educators, they're bureaucrats. They're going to teach whatever the state tells them to teach, even though it's wrong. And this goes on to say there aren't any scientifically proven positives. Well, that's false, according to the Smithsonian. Here's why your eyes seem to be wired backwards. It says the glial cells did indeed create columns of concentrated light. See, the photoreceptors are behind these glial cells. And these glial cells filter out the UV light that could blind us. So there's a reason for that. And then Medical Express says that the glial cells can guide light just like fiber optic cables. That's an incredible design. And this optimization is such that color vision during the day is enhanced while nighttime vision suffers very little. So this statement that says they don't know why, that's false. And then this one talks about an asteroid impact 66 million years ago, and the dinosaur species were killed off by this event. Well, keep in mind, blood cells and blood vessels and nerves and bone cells can't last millions of years. Collagen can't even last 1,000,000 years. And that's why the person who found these blood cells or these blood vessels was so shocked, because they won't change the date of the dinosaurs. It shouldn't happen, is what she says. Well, yeah, it shouldn't happen if they're millions of years old, but if they're only thousands of years old, it's not a big deal. But let's just listen to her.
The laws of chemistry and biology and everything else that we know say that it should be gone. It should be degraded completely.
And when I poked into it, it was spongy. It was flexible and soft tissue.
Flexible tissue from a 68-million-year-old dinosaur?
Blood vessels.
There they are.
Transparent, hollow, pliable, flexible, branching blood vessels that contain small, round, red microstructures floating in the vessels. I said, this is not possible. Do it again. We got another piece of bone. We put it in the solution. We waited 2 or 3 or 4 weeks. Looked again, more blood vessels. We must have repeated that with probably 17 or 18 different fragments of bone.
And that's not in the textbook. That was 20 years ago they found that. There's PhD scientists who don't know about that. So we need to get all this stuff they're sweeping under the rug. We have to bring it into the light, because millions of years just does not work. And then this one, I couldn't believe this. Anybody knows what those are? Haeckel's fake drawings? You look on the right, it's a bird, a bunny, or a person. And you look on the left, they all look pretty much the same. And then the narrator says, animals go through similar stages of development. They're calling people animals. No, we're made in the image of God. We have the Spirit of God in us. We're not animals. And this is Haeckel's fake drawings, and they're real similar to these images. And they're in Sauk Rapids, too, because at the fair, there's some students walk by from Sauk Rapids and said, yeah, we got taught that, too. And those are false. They're real similar to Haeckel's fake drawings back in the 1870s, over 150 years ago. And this is what they actually look like. They don't look anything like what he drew. They don't look anything like each other. And so why is he saying that we all go through our evolutionary ancestry? That's what he was trying to project with those. And my wife wanted to make sure I point out that's one of the reasons why we have abortion. Oh, it's just in the fish stage. It's not a person. No, it is a person from conception. You got a brand new DNA. It's not your body if it's different DNA. And this is from 1997. It says, embryonic fraud lives on, still appear in reference books such as Gray's Anatomy and 2024 science books. It says, although Haeckel confessed to drawing from memory and was convicted of fraud at the University of Jena, the drawings persist. That's the real mystery. Yeah, why are they still in there? Well, let's let Eugenie Scott, she's the president of the National Center for Science Education, we'll let her explain why these false drawings, and what does she call them? They're not reliable, why they're still in there.
And actually, it's been known for 10 or 15 years that Haeckel's embryos are not to be relied upon. The reason why the diagrams are reproduced is because they're easily available. There's no copyright on them. It's an easy way to illustrate a point.
Well, if your point can't be illustrated with something that's reliable and you have to use unreliable sources to illustrate your point, don't teach that point. Just teach what's true. And this is 10 years ago, how fudged embryo illustrations led to drawn-out lies. So it's common knowledge. Why is it in a 2024 textbooks? It's embarrassing but true. Some of the most influential drawings in the history of biology are wrong, exaggerated to fit a thesis. So we've seen them manipulate the data to get 1%. We've seen them ignore stuff to our eyes. And so this is false. And then this one, it talks about Lucy, a skeleton of a female Australopithecus afarensis. That's Lucy. And direct ancestor of human evolutionary line. And what did they do to Lucy's hip to make it a human hip? They cut it and they twisted it from a chimp hip to a human hip. And they had a kiosk next to the anthropology department of several years ago. And I pointed that out and they said, no, they didn't. I said, yeah, they did. She said, no, they didn't. I said, I got it on my computer. Do you want to see it? No. Don't confuse me with the facts, but this is what they did.
The perfect fit was an illusion that made Lucy's hip bone seem to flare out like a chimp's. But all was not lost. Lovejoy decided he could restore the pelvis to its natural shape. He didn't want to tamper with the original, so he made a copy in plaster. He cut the damaged pieces out and put them back together the way they were before Lucy died. It was a tricky job, but after taking the kink out of the pelvis, it all fit together perfectly, like a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. As a result, the angle of the hip looks nothing like a chimp's, but a lot like ours.
Well, yeah, I hope so. If you cut it apart and put it back together the way you want it, it better look that way. And it reminds me of what, who was it? Senator Johnson talked about Eisenhower's farewell address. If you pay for science, you're going to get the science you're paying for. And Dr. Jerry Bergman validates that too. He says at med schools, you know, the hospital doesn't pay the doctors, they get paid by grants. And if you want your grant renewed, you better get the data they want, or your grant's not renewed. And that's what happened in Rochester. I know somebody who works down there. Okay, now the Earth's oldest rock was discovered in 2008 along Hudson Bay. When was the Earth's oldest rock discovered? 2008. Well, in 2019, NASA came out and said they found the Earth's oldest rock on the moon. So this is false. It can't be 2008. It's founded on the moon. And it goes on to, NASA says the rock crystallized about 12 miles beneath Earth's surface. Well, how do you get something made crystallizing 12 miles deep onto the moon? And that's the segue to the hydroplate theory. You know, this theory answers so many questions.